At 70, our children finally gave us the life we dreamed of. There is a particular kind of morning that millions of Americans over 70 know well. You wake up, the house is quiet, there is nowhere to be. Nobody is waiting on you. And the life you actually wanted, the one you quietly folded up and put away sometime in your 30s, is still sitting in that drawer, untouched. Robert is 71, Carol is 69. They live in a 3-bedroom house in Columbus, Ohio, the same house they bought in 1987. They raised 3 kids, worked 40 combined years, and somewhere between the Little League games and the college tuition payments and the cross-country moving trucks they rented to help their children leave, they stopped being Robert and Carol. They became Mom and Dad. Full stop. This is not a fairy tale. This is Tuesday morning in Middle America, and it is more common than anyone talks about. In 1976, Robert was 23 years old and enrolled in his 2nd year of an architecture program at Ohio State. He sketched constantly: restaurants, public libraries, community centers, buildings that were meant to be lived in, not just occupied. His professors told him he had a rare instinct for human-centered design. Carol, at 21, was writing, not casually, seriously. She had completed 60 pages of a novel set in rural Appalachia, a story about 3 generations of women and the silence between them. Her creative writing professor told her to finish it. She never did. They married in 1978. Carol was pregnant by 1979. Robert left the architecture program 1 semester short of graduating because the family needed a steady income, not a degree that would take 2 more years to pay off. He took a job in construction project management, stable, decent pay, not what he imagined. Carol's 60 pages went into a shoebox on the closet shelf. Neither of them made a scene about it. That was not who they were. They were practical. They were Americans of a particular generation, raised to work hard, sacrifice quietly, and call it a good life. And in many ways, it was. What the next 4 decades looked like, factually. Robert worked for the same construction firm for 31 years. He managed projects he didn't design. He was good at his job. He was respected. He came home tired every night and still coached Little League on Saturdays because his son needed him to. Carol raised 3 children, re-entered the workforce part-time when the youngest started middle school, and spent the better part of a decade managing the financial and emotional logistics of a household that was always one unexpected bill away from stress. There were 2 car loans simultaneously for 6 years. There was a period when they quietly used a credit card to cover groceries and didn't tell the kids. There was the year their daughter needed emergency surgery, and the out-of-pocket costs took 3 years to pay down. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent survey of consumer finances, nearly 50% of Americans between 55 and 64 have less than $100,000 saved for retirement. Not because they were reckless, because this is what raising a family in America actually costs. Robert and Carol were not exceptions. They were the rule. The kids grew up, got degrees. Robert and Carol made sure of that. Got jobs, got married, scattered across the country, Denver, Seattle, Charlotte. The house in Columbus got very quiet. Robert retired at 67. Carol had stopped working at 64 when her back made the retail job unsustainable. The retirement that American culture sells you, golf courses, warm weather, endless leisure, is not the retirement most people get. Most people get a Tuesday that looks exactly like the Monday before it, except now there is no office to go to, no project to manage, no meeting that needs you. Robert gained 14 pounds in the first year, not from laziness, from purposelessness, from a body that had been built around forward motion suddenly having nowhere to move toward. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Aging and Health found that loss of occupational identity is the single most underreported psychological crisis in men over 65 in the United States. It does not make the news. It does not get a diagnosis. It just looks like a man sitting in front of a television, getting quieter every year. Carol's version was different, but equal. She had spent 35 years being needed, viscerally, constantly, urgently needed. Now her children called on Sundays when they remembered. The calls were warm. They were also 12 minutes long. She did not complain. She was a Midwestern woman of a certain generation. Complaining was not in the vocabulary. But she had stopped laughing the way she used to laugh. Her daughter noticed it first, then dismissed the thought because there was dinner to cook in Seattle and a toddler refusing to sleep. Robert and Carol had built 3 successful, independent human lives, and quietly, without anyone meaning for it to happen, they had become invisible. It was a Saturday in November when Robert found the sketchbook. He had gone into the garage looking for holiday decorations. The sketchbook was in a box labeled College Misc, a box that had moved with them 4 times and never been opened. He stood in the cold garage in his slippers and turned the pages slowly. Buildings he had designed at 22, notes in the margins, a whole imagined life in pencil lines. He put it back in the box, but he didn't close the box. That same weekend, their eldest daughter Melissa was on a group text with her brothers, Daniel in Denver and Jake in Charlotte. She had just gotten off a call with her mother and something felt off. Not medically, something harder to name. She typed, "Has anyone else noticed Mom and Dad seem like they've just stopped?" Daniel replied, "They're in their 70s. That's kind of normal, right?" Jake sent a shrug emoji. Melissa called Daniel directly. The conversation that followed was uncomfortable in the way that honest family conversations always are. Daniel defended himself. He sent money for Christmas. He called regularly. Melissa wasn't attacking him. She was asking something different. She said, "When is the last time any of us asked them what they still want? Not what they need, what they want." Nobody had an answer. Melissa flew to Columbus in January. No occasion, no holiday, just a visit. She sat with her father at the kitchen table and asked him something she had never asked before. She said, "Dad, what did you actually want to be?" Robert looked at her for a long moment. Then he got up and went to the garage. He came back with the sketchbook. He talked for 2 hours about the architecture program, about human-centered design, about a specific philosophy, that buildings should make people feel less alone. He had not spoken about any of this in approximately 40 years. Melissa listened, did not interrupt, did not check her phone. With Carol, the conversation arrived differently. Melissa found the shoebox, still on the closet shelf 37 years later. 60 pages, handwritten, yellowing at the edges. She read the first page in front of her mother. Carol said, "Oh, that old thing." Melissa said, "Mom, this is really good." Carol laughed the deflecting laugh of someone who has been waiting a long time to be taken seriously and no longer believes it will happen. Melissa did not move on. She said it again. "I mean it. This is really good." What the 3 siblings organized over the next 2 months was not a grand gesture. It was 5 specific human decisions. First, they found a community architecture and design program through Columbus's City Planning Department, a volunteer initiative where retired professionals help redesign public spaces in underserved neighborhoods. Robert had never heard of it. He joined in March. He is now one of their most active contributors. Second, Melissa hired a local editor, a graduate student, for $200 to give Carol 60 pages a professional read and a written response. The editor's note back said, "This deserves to be finished." Carol read that note 4 times. Third, for Robert and Carol's 45th anniversary, the 3 siblings booked a long weekend in Asheville, North Carolina, the setting Carol had researched decades ago for the novel she never finished. She had mentioned it once in passing in 1994. Melissa had written it down. Fourth, the Sunday calls were restructured, longer. Each grandchild was assigned a question to ask their grandparents about their lives, their memories, their opinions. Robert and Carol were no longer the audience of their children's lives. They were participants again. Fifth, Daniel, a software developer in Denver, spent one weekend building Carol a simple private blog, password protected, just for her writing, just for the pages, no pressure to publish. Just a place that said, "Your words deserve a home." Carol at a desk, laptop open, typing, really typing. The first night Carol opened the blog, she sat there for 20 minutes without writing anything. Then she started. She wrote for 3 hours. She picked up the story exactly where she had left it, as if 37 years were simply a long pause between paragraphs. She wrote until 1 a.m. She woke up the next morning and wrote again before breakfast. Robert showed up to his first community design session in a borrowed hard hat and a 40-year-old sketchbook. Within 30 minutes, he was on his knees on the floor of a church community room, sketching a proposed layout for a neighborhood resource center. A 26-year-old urban planning intern looked over his shoulder and said, "Sir, where did you study?" Robert said, "Ohio State, long time ago." She said, "It shows." He drove home and sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside. Robert volunteers 12 hours a week with the City Design Initiative. He has been credited on 2 completed community projects. He was asked last fall to speak at a local urban planning conference. He is 71 years old and was introduced as a designer with a 5-decade perspective. He stood at that podium and thought about a garage in November and a box that almost stayed closed. Carol is on page 140. The novel is real now, not a memory of ambition, but an actual, living manuscript. She has joined a Columbus area writers group that meets every other Thursday. They are, she reports, ruthlessly honest and completely wonderful. They took a road trip last summer through Appalachia. Research and vacation combined. Carol photographed everything. Robert sketched the small towns. They were gone for 11 days and came home looking 10 years younger. The Harvard study of adult development, the longest happiness study in human history, running for over 85 years, concluded with a finding that cuts through every assumption about aging and success. The single greatest predictor of a flourishing later life is not wealth, not physical health, not location. It is purposeful engagement and the quality of close relationships. Robert and Carol are not wealthy. The house in Columbus is the same house. Their savings are modest. Nothing material changed. But Carol is a writer again. Robert is a designer again. And their children stopped treating them like a problem to be managed and started treating them like the people they actually are. That changed everything. A kitchen table, morning coffee, Robert's sketchbook, Carol's laptop. 2 people, alive. If your parents are still here, do you know what they closed the lid on so you could have what you have? Have you ever asked them not what they need from you, but what they still want for themselves? You don't need a large budget for this. You need one real conversation, one afternoon, one question asked and actually heard. They spent 40 years building your life. They are not done living theirs. Don't let the last chapter be the quiet one. Make it the loudest, fullest, most alive chapter they have ever had. It is not too late. It is never too late. Robert and Carol at a diner, sketchbook and notebook side by side, coffee between them, talking, laughing, present. What did your parent give up for you? Write it below, one line. Let them know you remember.